Have you ever had a coworker who seemed almost too good to be true? Well, wait until you hear what happened when my boss decided I was going to be his new personal project. If you're enjoying this so far, smash that like or subscribe button right now and let me know I'm not the only one who thinks this is terrifying. All the stories in today's video are narrated by me. But before we get into them, let's meet the first story's main character, George Hunter. He always says that just because you spend a lot of time with someone at work doesn't mean you actually know who they are. You think you know them, but you really don't. Let's find out why. I once had exactly $12 in my bank account. My rent was 5 days overdue, and my landlord had already taped a final notice to my door that morning. I was only 23 years old. The interest on my student loans was growing faster than I could ever hope to pay them off, and I was stuck working a miserable temp job. Every lunch break, I sat alone in my car. Half the time, I didn't even eat. I just calculated exactly how many miles I could drive before I ran completely out of gas. That's how this whole thing started. I was standing in the office kitchen, staring at a vending machine I couldn't even afford to use. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand when a man in a sharp gray suit walked in. I knew he was upper management, someone important, but I didn't even know his name yet. He saw me crying, but he didn't ask what was wrong. Instead, he walked over, pulled a thick envelope from his pocket, and slid it onto the table beside me. "Fix whatever's worrying you," he said. His voice was calm and low. Then he looked at me and added, "You're too young to look this tired." Inside the envelope was $500 in cash. I tried to give it back, but he flat out refused. "Consider it an advance on the bonus you're going to earn," he told me. A week later, he pulled some strings and got me hired full-time at a salary that was almost double what I had been making. His name was George, and for the first 6 months, I honestly thought he was the kindest person I had ever met. But here's the crazy part. That kindness was actually the beginning of something much darker. George became my mentor. He was in his late 50s, and because of the age difference, I started looking up to him like a father figure. He was rich, really rich. His family came from old money, and he treated his job more like a hobby than a career. He taught me how to handle difficult clients, and even how to dress for important board meetings. He took me to expensive lunches where we talked about my career goals. I felt safe. I felt like someone finally had my back. But I was completely wrong. Now this is where things get really interesting. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. George didn't cross the line all at once. He just kept moving it, little by little, until eventually I had almost no personal space left. It started with him needing to know exactly where I was at all times. If I went to the bathroom, he would somehow be standing near the copier when I came back. He'd smile and say, "You were gone a long time." But his eyes would scan my face like he was checking to see if something was wrong. Then I started finding things on my desk. It wasn't just lunch anymore. He bought me a brand new winter coat because he said mine looked cheap. Then he bought me a new phone because he didn't like that my old one had a cracked screen. I tried to say no, but he would simply leave the gifts on my desk and walk away. One afternoon, he called me into his office. My private personnel file was sitting open on his desk. He wasn't even looking at me. He was just staring at the paperwork. Then he said he noticed I lived on 4th Street. "That's not a safe area for a girl living alone," he told me. He said he owned a rental property in the Heights that was currently empty. I should move there, rent-free. I told him I was fine where I was, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. He looked up. His face suddenly went completely flat. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "You shouldn't be ungrateful." That was the first time I was genuinely afraid of him. I started pulling away, but that only made him try harder. He began waiting for me in the parking lot every single day, leaning against my car door so I couldn't get inside without getting close to him. One evening, he looked at me and asked, "Why are you staying away from me?" The look in his eyes told me everything was about to change. The parking garage was completely empty and silent. I gripped my keys so tightly they dug into my palm. I tried to tell him I was just overwhelmed with work, but he didn't want to hear it. He stepped directly into my personal space. Then he said something I will never forget. "I made you." He actually said that. He told me I was nothing before he helped me. He told me I owed him. If you're finding this story as intense as I am, smash that like button and let me know what you think so far. The very next morning, I went to HR and told them everything. I explained the money, the gifts, the way he waited beside my car every day, and everything else that had happened. But the HR director just stared at me with an uncomfortable expression. She told me George was a pillar of the company. His family had basically built the office we were sitting in. Then she actually had the nerve to tell me that I was probably misinterpreting his kindness because of the age difference. "He's just a lonely man," she said. Then she warned me not to make a scene because it wouldn't end well for me. So I quit. I didn't have another job lined up. I didn't have a backup plan, but I couldn't breathe inside that building anymore. I packed my things, left that afternoon, and blocked George's number immediately. I honestly thought that would be the end of it, but that's where things got really dark. 2 weeks later, I was in my kitchen washing dishes when I noticed a flash of silver outside. I looked through the window. My heart dropped. George's luxury car was parked directly in front of my house. He wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting there, watching. I called the police, but when they arrived, they actually seemed annoyed with me. They told me that because he was parked on a public street and wasn't on my property, they couldn't arrest him just for sitting in his car. I begged the officer for help. I told him George was my former boss and that he was stalking me. The officer simply told me to call again if George actually stepped onto my property. George stayed there for 3 hours before finally driving away. But he came back the next night. And the night after that. Sometimes he would get out of the car and stand on the sidewalk, staring at my front door like a statue. He never knocked. He never yelled. He just stood there. I stopped sleeping. Every night, I pushed my heavy dresser in front of my bedroom door because I was terrified of what he might do. If you want to see how this ends, make sure you hit subscribe and tap that bell so you don't miss the next part, because you won't believe what happened next. It was 3 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. I was sitting in my dark living room looking through the curtains. His car was gone. For a moment, I thought he had finally given up. I went into the kitchen to get some water, keeping the lights off so nobody outside could see me. Then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. A door closing. It came from the laundry room, the door that led to the backyard. I slowly put my glass down. Then I listened. A soft squeak came from the hinges. Someone was inside my house. I didn't scream. I didn't run for the front door because I was almost certain George would be waiting for me outside. Instead, I dropped to the floor and crawled. I squeezed myself into the tiny space between the refrigerator and the wall, pulled my knees against my chest, and held my breath. Then I heard wet shoes squeaking across the linoleum. He wasn't rushing. He was walking slowly, and he was humming a quiet tune. The sound seemed to vibrate through the entire house. He walked into the living room. "Chloe?" It was George. His voice sounded cheerful, almost like we were at an office party. Then he said he knew I was awake because he had seen the kitchen light. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep myself from making a sound. My phone was still in my pocket. I pulled it out and dialed 911. I couldn't speak, so I tapped the screen 3 times and left the line open, praying they would understand. Then I heard him opening doors, the guest room, the bathroom, and finally, my bedroom. "You're making this difficult," he shouted from the hallway. He wasn't pretending to be nice anymore. He sounded furious. Then I heard wood splinter. He had kicked my bedroom door. He was coming back for me, and I had nowhere left to run. Which part of this is the most terrifying to you? Let me know in the comments. Then I saw his shadow stretching across the floor. It stopped directly in front of the refrigerator. He was only 5 feet away from me. Suddenly, he stopped humming. He stood completely still, listening, waiting for the smallest sound. I squeezed my eyes shut. I knew he was about to look behind the refrigerator. I braced myself, ready to fight back with everything I had. I still couldn't hear any sirens. Then the kitchen suddenly flashed blue, then red, then blue again. The police had shut off their sirens a block away so George wouldn't hear them coming. George turned toward the window. He didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he calmly straightened his tie like he was getting ready for another business meeting. Then the back door flew open. "Police, show me your hands." I heard a struggle, then the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. "I got him. He's cuffed." I stayed hidden. A female officer saw me and immediately ran over. "It's okay," she said. "We have him." They started walking George out through the back door. He looked back at me, but he didn't look crazy. He just looked disappointed, like I had accidentally ruined a surprise party he had been planning. But then another officer put on a pair of gloves and walked over to the sink. He was looking at something George had dropped. It was a black duffel bag. I asked what was inside. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. The officer unzipped the bag a few inches and shined his flashlight inside. Then he froze. He slowly shook his head. "Don't look at it," he told me. I stepped forward anyway. "Is it a gun?" He turned the bag away from me, but he wasn't fast enough. I saw a coil of heavy rope, a roll of duct tape, and a box of clear industrial trash bags. George hadn't come there to talk. He had come prepared to clean up. George eventually went to prison for burglary and stalking, although his family's expensive lawyers managed to get him a lighter sentence. I never saw him again. I had worked in customer service long enough to know how to deal with angry people, but I wasn't prepared for the person who would eventually be standing behind the counter with me at my new job. Because life goes on, and sometimes the people you meet later can be just as disturbing. I had been working at Starbucks for about a year and a half. I actually liked the job, and I was good at it. Eventually, I got promoted to shift supervisor. Because of the promotion, I had to transfer to another store in the district. I was actually excited about the move. On my first day, I walked in for orientation. The store manager gave me a tour and introduced me to the rest of the team. That's when I met Daisy. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next with her. The manager introduced Daisy like she was some kind of local celebrity. "And this is Daisy. She's our best barista. She absolutely owns the morning rush." I smiled and held out my hand. "I'm really looking forward to working with you." Daisy didn't even look at my hand. She just made a low, annoyed grunt, turned around, and walked away. I stood there with my hand still extended, feeling like an idiot. The manager laughed it off. "She's just focused on her work." I thought maybe Daisy was simply having a bad day, but I soon realized this wasn't a bad mood. It was personal. This job requires constant communication. You have to call out drinks, coordinate breaks, and tell people when you're falling behind. But Daisy refused to even make eye contact with me. If I asked her to pass me a carton of milk, She acted like I wasn't there. If I told her an order had changed, she ignored me and intentionally made it wrong. The whole store became a mess. Customers were angry because their orders were wrong or taking too long, and I was the one standing there apologizing for her. Which part of this coworker drama would have annoyed you the most? Drop it in the comments. But wait until you hear what she did next. Things were about to get much worse. I thought a simple apology might fix everything. I had no idea it would trigger a reaction that would leave me shaking. One afternoon, after a particularly bad shift where Daisy had ignored me for nearly 4 hours, I decided to break the ice. I figured maybe if I talked to her, she would finally calm down and act like a normal person. I waited until we were both clocking out and caught her near the back door. "Hey, Daisy, look, I don't know if I did something to offend you, but I really want us to get along. I'm sorry if I stepped on your toes or something." She stopped. Slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes were wide, way too wide. Then she opened her mouth and let out an ear-piercing scream. It wasn't fear. It was pure rage. She screamed directly in my face, shoved open the heavy metal door, and stormed into the parking lot. I stood there, completely stunned, my hand still hovering over the time clock. If you're enjoying this story, smash that like button. The next day, I pulled another coworker aside. "What's Daisy's deal?" The coworker looked around to make sure nobody was listening. Then she whispered, "The manager treats her like a daughter. It's total favoritism." She explained that Daisy thought she actually ran the store. She had wanted the supervisor position I got, and because she didn't get it, she absolutely hated me. At first, I actually felt some sympathy for her. Getting passed over for a promotion you really wanted can hurt. But over the next year, that sympathy completely disappeared. Daisy wasn't just rude anymore. She was becoming aggressive. She claimed she owned the morning shift. In reality, that meant she screamed at customers. I'm not exaggerating. If someone took a few seconds too long to order, she snapped at them. If they asked for a small change to their drink, she rolled her eyes and slammed the cup down on the counter. Later, she would laugh and say, "Oh, they like being talked to that way. They know I'm just kidding." But they definitely didn't think it was funny. Customers would come up to me at the handoff plane and quietly say, "I'm so glad she's not taking my order today. She actually scares me." But here's the crazy part. Things were about to become dangerously hostile. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next part. Daisy would deliberately do her tasks badly, then turn around and claim she was the only person who knew how to do them correctly. It was incredibly manipulative. But the real problem was that I was starting to feel physically unsafe around her. One night, Daisy and I were closing the store together. It was just the two of us. The doors were locked, the lights were dim. I was in the back office counting the safe when I suddenly heard a loud crash from the front. I ran out. "Everything okay?" Daisy was standing in the middle of the floor. A glass pitcher had shattered everywhere. She wasn't even trying to clean it up. She was just staring at the broken glass. Then she looked at me. In her hand was a box cutter she used to open shipment boxes. She wasn't directly threatening me with it, but she kept clicking the blade in and out, over and over. "Just an accident," she said. Her voice was completely flat. She didn't move toward the broom. She just watched me. I grabbed the broom myself and cleaned everything up while keeping my back against the wall so she couldn't get behind me. I didn't even finish counting the money that night. I locked it in the safe and got out of there as fast as I could. Now this is where things get even more intense. Then came the Tuesday shift from hell. I was the supervisor on duty, and the store was insanely busy. Daisy was making drinks, but she wasn't calling them out. The drinks kept piling up on the counter while customers asked where their orders were. I walked over to her as calmly as I could. "Daisy, I need you to call out the orders so customers can hear their names. That's the standard for everyone, including me." She stopped moving. Slowly, she put down the milk pitcher. You have to understand something. Daisy was a big woman. She was about 5 inches taller than me and probably outweighed me by 30 or 40 pounds. Wait until you hear how she reacted when I finally stood my ground. She turned around. Her face was deep red with anger. I could actually see the veins in her neck. Then she lunged. She didn't just take a step toward me. She threw her entire body weight at me. I stumbled backward until my lower back slammed into the counter. She got extremely close to me, close enough that I could feel the heat from her skin. "Back off!" she screamed. I could feel spit hitting my face. "I'm serious. You really don't want to see what I'm capable of." I put my hands up, palms open, and didn't say a word. I slowly moved sideways along the counter until I was out of her reach. Then I went straight to the back room and locked the door. I sat on an old milk crate trying to slow my breathing and get my heart rate under control. My legs felt like jelly. If this story is stressing you out as much as it stressed me out, smash that like button and let me know you're still with me. I reported everything to the manager immediately. I honestly thought, this is it. She threatened a supervisor. There's no way she gets away with this. But the manager just sighed. She told me Daisy was the best barista they had. She said Daisy basically owned the morning shift. Then she told me I just needed to learn how to listen to her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm her supervisor," I said. "Are you seriously telling me I'm supposed to take orders from her? She physically threatened me." The manager simply said it was easier to let Daisy have her way. She told me not to make a big deal about it. That was when things started feeling seriously suspicious. I realized I was completely on my own. The manager wasn't going to help me. And if something actually happened to me, I had a feeling she would probably try to cover it up. So I called my old boss, the one who had believed in me and helped me get promoted. He gave me one simple piece of advice. Document everything. Write it all down. Dates, times, and anyone who saw it. Keep your emotions out of it. Stick to the facts. Then take everything to the district manager. So that's exactly what I did. For the next 2 weeks, I carried a small notebook everywhere. I recorded every scream, every threat, every time Daisy refused to do her job. I was building a case against her. Finally, I told my manager that I had documentation and wanted a formal meeting with her and the district manager. She looked nervous when I said it. She told me to come in the next day at 2 p.m. They would hear me out. Hit subscribe and tap that bell so you don't miss how this mess ends. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, rehearsing exactly what I was going to say. For the first time, I felt like I might finally get some justice. I arrived at the store at 1:55 p.m. As I walked toward the back office, the door opened. Daisy walked out. And this is the part that still makes me shake my head. She wasn't crying. She wasn't holding a termination notice. She was smiling. She looked like she had just won a massive bet. She looked me directly in the eyes, gave me a smug little smile, and walked past me toward the floor. I walked into the office. The store manager and district manager were waiting. I pulled out my journal and placed it on the desk. I told them I had documented everything. The threats, the ignored orders, the customer complaints. But the district manager didn't even touch the notebook. He simply raised his hand to stop me. He told me they weren't interested in hearing it. They had already heard enough. Then he said they trusted Daisy's version of the story. Finally, he told me they didn't think I was a good fit for the position anymore. I stood there, staring at my journal. Then I looked back at them. That was when I realized nothing I said was going to matter. They had already made their decision. Daisy had gotten to them first with her lies and fake tears, and they believed every word. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply picked up my journal, turned around, and walked out. I never went back to that store. The very next day, I applied to grad school because I needed to get as far away from that industry as possible. Eventually, I moved to a new town, earned my degree, and moved on with my life. But just a few months ago, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from a mutual friend. It was a picture of Daisy, and she was still wearing a uniform. Which part of this betrayal surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments below. She was standing beside a patrol car. That same smug smile was still on her face, and there was a badge pinned to her chest. Daisy is actually a police officer now. The woman who screamed in my face and manipulated an entire management team is now walking around with a gun and the authority of the law. If that's as wild to you as it is to me, hit that like button real quick. But that wasn't the only disturbing coworker I ever had. Before all of this, I worked with a project manager who honestly believed he was everyone's boss. He was constantly spying on people. If you were away from your desk for more than 5 minutes, he would report you to your actual manager. Every time he got up, he would walk down every aisle, peeking into every cubicle just to see who was there. He had absolutely no reason for these huge detours other than to be a jerk. I got so tired of it that I started keeping a tally on a whiteboard in my cubicle. Every time he walked past, I added another mark. Every month, I transferred those numbers into a spreadsheet on my phone. I tracked it for 4 straight years. The whole department laughed about it. I even made graphs from the data. I still have that spreadsheet 10 years later. It became a running joke around the office. Eventually, we gave him a nickname, the Warden. But the laughter didn't last forever, and you won't believe how quickly everything changed when we hired a new guy. His name was John. From the beginning, there was something strange about him. He was extremely quiet. He never talked to anyone during lunch, and he always sat with his back against the wall. He had only been working there for about 3 weeks when it happened. One afternoon, John got up to take a phone call or use the bathroom. He was gone for maybe 15 minutes, but the warden was already on patrol. He saw John's empty desk, checked his watch, and waited. When John finally returned, the warden walked straight up to him. He started yelling loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. He accused John of stealing company time. Then, he fired him on the spot. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Usually, people would just pack their things and leave. John didn't. He stood completely still. He stared the warden directly in the eyes. Then, in a very low voice, he said, "You're making a mistake." The warden laughed. He pointed toward the door and told John to get out before he called security. That's when John leaned closer. I was sitting right beside them, so I heard every word. "If you do this, I will kill you," John said. "I will kill you and your family." He didn't scream. He said it calmly, like he was stating a fact. And that calmness made it even more terrifying. The warden just rolled his eyes and mocked him. John grabbed his jacket and walked out. He never looked back. Now this is where things get really interesting, and honestly, a little chilling. The warden spent the rest of the day bragging about what he had done. He acted like he was some kind of hero for trimming the fat. That Friday evening, when the office closed, He got into his car and drove home. But Monday morning came. The warden wasn't there. That was strange because he never missed work, not even when he was sick. Tuesday came. Still nothing. Nobody had heard from him. Our boss called his phone over and over. It was switched off. He even drove to the warden's house. The doors were locked. Mail was piling up in the mailbox. That afternoon, they finally called the police. The officers traced his route home from work. On the way to his house was a long stretch of road surrounded by thick woods. That's where they found his car. But it wasn't simply parked on the side of the road. It was hidden behind thick bushes, completely out of sight from passing traffic. The police searched the woods for an entire week. They brought in dogs. They searched everywhere, but they found absolutely nothing. Which part of this story seems the most suspicious to you? Drop a comment and tell me what you think happened. Then the police started digging through the office records, and what they discovered next was enough to make your blood run cold. John had been fired on the exact same day the warden disappeared. But wait, it gets even stranger. When the police went to the address listed on John's paperwork, there was no house. There was only an empty, overgrown lot. They ran his ID and social security number. That's when they realized everything was fake. His identity was fake. His address was fake. John didn't even exist on paper. He was a ghost. We were all terrified. It's one thing to have a strange coworker, but realizing you've been sitting next to someone using a completely fake identity is a whole different kind of scary. If you're enjoying the mystery so far, smash that like button. About 2 weeks passed. I was trying to get back to normal. Then, one Saturday morning, I was at the grocery store looking for pasta sauce. I looked up from the shelf, and my heart stopped. I saw him. John. He was wearing a hat and dark sunglasses, but I would have recognized that face anywhere. He was casually shopping for canned food like nothing had happened. My hands immediately started sweating. I abandoned my cart in the middle of the aisle and ran toward the back of the store. I hid behind a stack of soda crates and pulled out my phone. I called our boss. My voice was shaking. "I see him," I whispered. "I see the guy who threatened the warden. He's at the supermarket on 5th Street. Our boss called the police immediately. Now here's where it gets interesting. I stayed hidden until I finally saw blue lights flashing outside. The police had arrived. They found John near the checkout line. He tried to run, but they tackled him and arrested him right there. After questioning him, the police finally learned the truth, and it was far more disturbing than any of us had imagined. Hit subscribe and tap that bell so you don't miss our next story. That Friday night, the warden had been driving home along a lonely road with no streetlights. He suddenly saw a tree trunk blocking the road. It hadn't been a stormy night. There was no strong wind. The tree had been placed there on purpose. When he stopped, he realized his tires were flat. He had driven over a strip of spikes. He got out to inspect the damage. That's when John stepped out of the darkness. He had a gun. John forced the warden into the back seat and drove the car off the road. Then he hid it behind thick bushes where nobody passing by could see it. After that, John took the warden deep into the woods. There was a tiny cave hidden in the forest. You wouldn't notice it unless you were standing almost directly in front of it. But here's the crazy part. John wasn't alone. He had a friend with him. Together, they kept the warden tied up inside that cave for 2 weeks. The only reason he was still alive was because John and his friend couldn't agree on what to do with him. John wanted revenge. He wanted to kill the warden for firing him. But his friend wanted money. He wanted to demand a ransom. They spent days arguing about it. John was planning to kill him that weekend, but because I happened to see John at the supermarket, the police were able to find the cave. They raided the woods, and they found the warden. He was badly shaken, exhausted, and terrified, but he was alive. The friend was arrested too. The warden never returned to work. He moved away and left management behind for good. He had completely lost his sense of safety in those woods. And honestly, I don't blame him. Which part of these stories surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to stay alert. Because sometimes, the people standing beside you at work aren't who you think they are. And after hearing stories like these, there's one thing I know for sure. Lock your doors, trust your instincts, and if someone makes you feel unsafe, don't ignore that feeling.